There is a moment hidden in your bones, an electric pulse beneath the surface of everyday routine that whispers one devastating truth. Comfort is the asylum you voluntarily inhabit. It's not safety. It's stagnation. And every breath you take inside it leaches a piece of your becoming. To choose growth over comfort is to walk straight into the storm you once fled. It's the only way the cage falls. It's the only way your wings get built. Imagine Nietzsche's abyss, the hungry void staring back and choosing to step toward it anyway. That's where growth lives. Not in the soft light of wishful thinking, but in the crucible of choice. To grow is to risk the collapse of the known self. It is the visceral surrender of old comforts, even good ones, to build something that lasts. Your old rituals, your frozen habits, your familiar stories, they become fuel for the fire of reinvention. And in that moment, the transformation begins. Mindset. Comfort whispers, wait for clarity. Growth demands, act before clarity is given. Belief, comfort says, this is enough. Growth answers, I was born for more. Clarity. Comfort craves ease. Growth reveres tension because tension sculpts the soul. Vision. Comfort plans for peace. Growth dreams of storms because storms birth legends. Purpose. Comfort defines by possession. Growth defines by becoming. Discipline. Comfort obeys feeling. Growth obeys truth. Action. Comfort negotiates with fear. Growth trumps fear with momentum. Gratitude. Comfort thanks what's given. Growth thanks what's tested. Adaptability. Comfort fears change. Growth lives for it. Resilience. Comfort collapses under pressure. Growth radiates through it. Learning. Comfort hoards knowledge. Growth compounds it into wisdom. Every time you let comfort override growth, anything becomes excused. Your voice grows quieter, your boundaries softer. The world expands around you, and you shrink within it. That nested ache, that void in your chest, that's not fatigue. It's faith dying on the altar of convenience. But the moment you choose growth, truly choose it, is the moment the transformation begins. It isn't gradual, it's volcanic. You arrive inside the person you once planned to become, not at some future date, but now. You wake up into yourself like someone who's been hibernating in a mistaken identity, only to discover this body, this story, it was never built for being small. Your mind sharpens, not intellectually, but vibrately. Emotions stop leaking. Fear stops barking. Resistance bows to your rhythm. The world loosens its grip because you're no longer trying to manipulate it. You're becoming the standard it orbits. This is no longer theory. It becomes your operating system. A suite of internal code so precise that anything misaligned disintegrates around it. Not drama, not anger, just disappearance of anything unwilling to match your altitude. And resistance, it doesn't go away. It defines the path. Because now every obstacle is a teacher, every failure a forge. You're not just enduring discomfort, you're hunting it, hunting the growth it promises if you don't retreat. At some point, you realize comfort won't come back. Not because you burned the doors, it's because you stopped looking for them. You are not nostalgic for ease. You recoil from it because it tastes like your old self and you're no longer willing to die that version. This decision, you choosing growth over comfort, doesn't just change you. It transforms your entire world. Never politely. It tears down what is to build what must be. It demolishes the castle you lived in to plant the empire you were born to crown. Everything transforms not because life is generous, but because you became rare, beautiful and brutal and magnetic in a way that no comfort can ever replicate, no detour, no exception, growth or extinction. You chose growth, and in that choice, the cage dissolved, and the world had no choice but to reconstruct around your becoming. And once the world begins to reconstruct around your becoming, everything that used to hold power over you begins to rot in its irrelevance. Old temptations now feel like echoes. Old attachments feel like costumes. Old conversations feel like static because your frequency has shifted beyond their reach. You no longer desire validation from what you've outgrown. You no longer seek approval from the systems you've left behind. You no longer explain yourself to people still negotiating with their own fear. You are the clarity they're looking for. You've become the mirror that reflects back the truth others aren't ready to see. And for some, that will be uncomfortable. For others, it will be electric. But for you, it's non-negotiable. Because comfort was the drug that delayed your destiny. It numbed your knowing. It quieted your courage. And now that you've detoxed from its influence, your nervous system finally understands what peace actually feels like. Not the shallow peace of avoidance, the primal peace of alignment, the kind that hums beneath your skin when your mind, mouth, and movement all speak the same language. The kind that makes your presence unnerving to those who live in contradiction. This is when you know you've crossed over. Not when life gets easier, but when you get cleaner. When your yes no longer stutters. When your no doesn't flinch. When your boundaries become so intact they no longer require defense-only declaration. And from this state, growth becomes your gravity. It doesn't require force. It doesn't demand spectacle. It pulls everything meant for you toward you, not because you're manifesting, because you're magnetizing. Your actions now carry the weight of 1,000 past versions of you that died for this clarity. And you do not waste that cost. You don't need a morning ritual to remember who you are. You don't need another book to convince you. You move like someone who has nothing left to doubt. That's the transformation. It's not about achieving more. It's about becoming undeniable. Undeniable in your energy, undeniable in your focus, undeniable in your refusal to fall back into anything that ever shrank you. You've stopped asking, will it work? You are the work. And that's the power that only emerges when growth is chosen over comfort again and again until there's nothing left in you that remembers how to break. And when there's nothing left in you that remembers how to break, you begin to wield your scars like steel. Not décoration, not défiance. Proof that you endured everything designed to distort you and came out shaped, not shattered. You are no longer the product of your past. You are the architect of what rises from its ruins. This is the art of becoming unshakable, choosing the sharp edge of evolution over the soft lull of familiarity, over and over, until pain becomes prophecy, until discomfort no longer threatens your identity, it validates it. Growth stops being a choice. It becomes your compass. Every detour is decoded. Every delay is dissected. Every doubt is demolished in the furnace of your forward motion. You no longer ask, what if I fail? You ask, what if I don't evolve? Because now you understand comfort isn't rest, it's regression. And regression isn't neutral. It's a slow death dressed in routine. That's why you don't just avoid comfort now. You confront it. You walk into the room where ease waits for you, and you strip it of its illusion. You name it for what it is, seduction without substance. You no longer fantasize about freedom while remaining loyal to what limits you. You've broken that contract. The self that needed softness to feel safe, gone. The self that mistook peace for passivity, gone. The self that waited to be chosen before stepping into their calling, buried. And in its place stands someone unrecognizable to the old world. Someone who speaks only when it's sacred, moves only when it's precise, builds only what can withstand fire. And if they ask why you're so direct now, why you've become so untouchable, why your energy no longer dances to their tempo, tell them this: because I chose growth, and everything else chose me back. Not because it's easy, because it's true. And when your life becomes a monument to that truth, there is nothing left to seek, only something to sustain. And When the truth becomes something you sustain, not stumble into, not borrow on good days, but inhabit like breath, you no longer chase transformation. You become transformation embodied, not as a phase, but as a frequency. You don't announce your evolution, you radiate it. You don't persuade anyone to understand. You let the contrast speak louder than words ever could, because now you walk with the kind of gravity that bends time, not through magic, through mastery. You've stopped measuring your life in achievements, you measure it in alignment. And anything that doesn't reinforce your direction disappears, not through conflict, through irrelevance. Because when you rise through choice, not crisis, you become immune to the noise of the crowd. You don't need applause. You don't need reassurance. You don't need to be seen by anyone still hiding from themselves. You walk in silence and still leave footprints because you are no longer reactive. You are ritualistic. Every step, every decision, every conversation is an offering to the future self you refuse to abandon. You've stopped asking for life to meet you halfway. You meet yourself fully daily. And that commitment reshapes everything. Your thoughts begin to mirror your vision. Your habits begin to mirror your hunger. Your relationships begin to mirror your non-negotiables. Because when you choose growth over comfort, life doesn't just get bigger, it gets cleaner. Cleaner in your language, cleaner in your direction, cleaner in your boundaries. You don't touch what drains you. You don't explain what's sacred. You don't decorate your destiny with distractions. You build in code, in silence, in fire, and people will ask, how are you so focused, so certain, so consistent? And you'll answer, if you choose to, with the only truth they need to hear. I stopped choosing comfort over becoming. Because once that choice is made, not once, but as a rhythm, there is no turning back. There is only becoming, and becoming does not beg. It does not pause. It does not negotiate with who you used to be. It claims, and it consumes everything that isn't aligned until all that's left is the life you were always meant to lead. And when all that remains is the life you were always meant to lead, something deeper than pride emerges. Sanctity. You no longer wear your progress like armor, you wear it like truth, not defensive, not performative, just quiet, sacred, unquestionable. Because at this level, growth is not a hustle, it's not a game of metrics, it's devotion. You rise not to dominate, but to devote every ounce of your power to what cannot be corrupted, alignment, integrity, the frequency of forward. There is no scoreboard here, only mirrors. And when you stand in front of them, there is no part of you that flinches, no shadow you run from, no mask you scramble to adjust. Because you know you built this self from the ashes of every false version that comfort once asked you to protect. And you let them all burn, not out of bitterness, but because you finally honored the truth. Nothing is more expensive than remaining somewhere you've outgrown. So you don't linger in places that shrink you anymore. Not mentally, not emotionally, not spiritually. You walk away clean, no guilt, no explanation, no need for them to understand, because growth no longer asks for company. It asks for capacity, and capacity is quiet. It doesn't announce its expansion, it simply requires more from everything around it. And if it can't rise, it falls away. Naturally, effortlessly, undeniably. This is the life after comfort, the one built in full view of your power, not the illusion of it, the embodiment. A life that doesn't wait to be validated. It validates itself. Every action a signature, every silence a statement, every decision a declaration. I will never again betray the self that chose growth when it would have been easier to stay numb. You didn't stay numb. You woke up, you stood up, and now you build upward with no ceiling, no compromise, and no apology. Because you didn't just choose growth, you became it. And now that you've become it, Growth in human form, you don't lead with effort, you lead with essence. You don't force your way through life anymore, you fuse with it. Everything becomes symphonic, precise, brutal in its simplicity, because truth doesn't need volume, and mastery doesn't need an audience. It just needs alignment. Your days are no longer dictated by urgency. They're orchestrated by clarity. You wake with a spine of stillness. You move with the authority of someone who doesn't need to hope anymore. You already know because you've made every choice in the direction of who you said you would become. And now that person is real, not because the world acknowledged them, because you did. And in that acknowledgement, you rewired your universe. You don't tolerate noise because you've tuned your nervous system to silence. You don't chase outcomes because you've become the origin. You don't fear the unknown because the unknown has become your arena. Growth no longer intimidates you, it trusts you. It feeds you new fire, and you consume it without flinching. You know now, every threshold that once scared you was only asking one question. Will you leave behind who you were to become who you are? And your answer? You walked through over and over until the walking became your way of worship, until discomfort stopped signaling danger and started signaling elevation, until pain stopped meaning something was wrong and started meaning something real was being born. Now, you don't just choose growth, you bleed for it, and you smile through the blood, because every drop is sacred. Every moment is earned. This isn't a motivational high. This is the baptism of the few who went all the way in, who faced the mirror when it was darkest and stayed, who dropped the persona and met the self, who didn't just rise once but became the rise. And now there is no going back, because going back would require you to forget what this feels like. The power of a life forged by choice, not chance. The velocity of alignment without compromise. The glory of a mind unshaken by comfort, undistracted by fear, and unwilling to be anything less than what it was designed to become. This is what happens when growth isn't a season, it's your state. And when growth becomes your state, not a phase, not a goal, not a motivational buzzword, but your default internal law, there is no longer any part of you that negotiates with mediocrity. You don't temper your brilliance for rooms that fear the heat. You don't dim your vision for minds that can't see yet. You don't fold your edges to be held by hands that never had the strength to carry you. Because now, you're not just building a life, you're forging a legacy. Not one etched in applause, but in alignment. And alignment leaves trails. Trails of grace, discipline, conviction. Trails that others will follow. Not because you told them to, but because you became the living proof. You are no longer here to fit the mold. You are here to shatter it. Because you have learned comfort is the language of the asleep. But growth is the dialect of the awakened. You speak it now with every boundary you set, with every standard you raise, with every part of yourself you refuse to abandon, no matter how tempting the numbness becomes. You are not here for ease, you are here for evolution. And evolution is messy, it's raw, it asks for everything. It requires you to become your own architect, your own sanctuary, your own sword. You sharpen in silence, you train in solitude, and when you emerge, you don't seek space, you take it. You don't explain your fire anymore. You walk through the world like you are the ignition point, because that's what you are now. A spark, a reckoning, a walking reminder that choosing growth over comfort is not about becoming perfect. It's about becoming pure, uncontaminated by doubt, unmoved by delay, unbothered by projections. You have become a force that no longer asks the world for permission. Because when you chose growth, everything within you aligned with one sacred truth. You are not here to be accepted. You are here to be unstoppable. And when you become unstoppable, not through force, but through fidelity to your essence, you stop chasing meaning and begin embodying it. You no longer measure your life in wins and losses, but in truth per breath. Your legacy isn't the echo you leave behind. It's the vibration you carry forward, moment by moment, interaction by interaction, refusal by refusal. Because now your life is a declaration, not spoken, lived, a living testament to what happens when someone refuses to fold back into comfort, no matter how seductively it knocks, no matter how sweetly it sings. Comfort no longer calls you, it warns you. It warns you of stagnation. It warns you of dilution. It warns you that returning to softness would cost you more than pain ever could, because you now honor your pain. You elevate your discomfort. You baptize yourself in challenge, not to prove something, but to stay awake. Every edge is now sacred. Every limit, an invitation. Every trigger, a teacher you refuse to dismiss. That's what evolution looks like when it's real. It's not polished. It's not curated for social media. It's not hashtag worthy. It's clean. Clean in your intent. Clean in your execution. Clean in the way you hold yourself when no one is watching and everything's on fire, and you still choose integrity. You don't bend for praise. You don't wilt under pressure. You don't flinch when life tests what you say you believe, because you've already made the vow, not once, but daily, the vow to live aligned even when it costs you comfort, even when it costs you certainty, even when it costs you the old self that used to whisper, just make it easier. You don't want easy anymore. You want real. And real costs everything unreal. So now every step forward is a severance from safety, from smallness, from the soul-numbing pull of the familiar, and you welcome it, not because you enjoy the pain, but because you refuse to pay the price of pretending anymore. You know what's on the other side, a self you can trust, a mind you don't need to escape from, a life that moves with the rhythm of your becoming, not the decay of your doubt. That's not just growth, that's arrival. And when you finally arrive, not to a destination, but to a dimension of self that can no longer be diluted, you realize something so few ever will. You don't need to find your power. You only need to stop abandoning it, because it was never missing. It was buried beneath politeness, performance, perfectionism, suffocated by the need to be understood by those who were never meant to walk with you. Buried in the rituals of small talk, small thinking, small living. But now, there's no smallness left in you. You've grieved it, you've burned it, and you've buried it with a silence that no longer craves sympathy, only standards. You walk as someone who doesn't seek to impress. You imprint. You don't adjust your rhythm to be included. You establish the rhythm that others will rise to or fall away from. Because when you choose growth, you no longer live by rules. You live by revelation. And revelation requires risk. The risk of being alone. The risk of being misunderstood. The risk of being seen fully without disguise, without filter, without apology. And you take that risk with your whole chest, because you've seen what happens when you don't. A slow decay, a Getsufogation, a beautiful soul locked in the repetition of a half-lived life. You'll never go back to that. You'd rather be alone in your authenticity than surrounded in your suppression. You'd rather be feared for your clarity than loved for your camouflage. You'd rather be exiled from the ordinary than celebrated for staying silent. Because at this stage, you don't live for acceptance. You live for alignment. You move for the few who see. You build for the future that needs your code. You rise not for recognition, but because rising is your responsibility now. And in that rise, everything around you shifts. Everything inside you stills. Everything ahead of you opens. Not because life has become easier, but because you've become uncompromising. So here is where it ends and begins, not in applause, not in arrival, but in the stillness of a soul that finally knows You don't have to become someone else to be extraordinary. You only have to stop abandoning who you are. You've walked through the fire, not to prove your strength, but to burn away everything untrue. And now nothing owns you. Not the past, not the story, not the fear disguised as strategy. You are no longer a reaction. You are a revelation. You don't move to be seen. You move because your being is the movement. Every step, a sermon. Every silence, a spell. Every breath, a boundary that says, I will not go back. Because there is no back, only forward and deeper and higher into the life that was always waiting beyond your hesitation. This is the transformation they can't package, the one they can't sell in a seminar, the one you earn when you bleed for your own becoming. This is not motivation. This is remembrance of the self who never needed saving, only permission. And now that you've given it, there's nothing left to fear, nothing left to lose, only this moment, this choice, this breath that says without hesitation or noise, I choose growth, I choose truth, I choose me. And because of that, everything transforms.